Hi, this is Sally Morgan, craniosacral therapist, physical therapist, and Tellington Tea Touch practitioner for animals and people. And this is Tristan. He's a Corgi. We're here for another episode of Conversations with a Corgi. Hi, Danny. Well, the wind is starting to howl, and it literally dropped 15-20 degrees when I was in the yard for 25 minutes just trying to remove the ice in my driveway. It is really stubborn. I mean, it was 60 here for a couple of days, and there are still patches as big as a car right near my mailbox that are just stubborn. And it's not usually like that. I mean, this ice storm we had when I was away at Christmas must have been pretty bad because it has been warm for 4 days, and that stubborn ice, even with ice melt on it, is not moving. So I couldn't get rid of that, but I did do a pretty thorough sweep off of the steps to try to get them as dry as possible so they won't be slippery. Had to do a little yard cleanup from the Corgi business. And then I have some really dramatic pictures of the flooding in my backyard. So I will post those later on. If you don't have the before picture, it's hard to understand how much flooding is going on in my little stream. But where the moose died is completely under probably 2 to 3 feet of water right now, it's really low there. And it's kind of sad because whatever's left may be washed away by this. Although I have to say, thanks to the beavers that were here before I moved in, they have dammed that area up pretty well and made that area prone to flooding. Because what beavers like to do is flood an area and kill the big trees so that the little tasty ashes that they like to eat will grow up around where the big trees were. And then they have like a delicious smorgasbord at all times. And they love that kind of tree, and they grow really quickly. And as the beavers eat them down, they grow right back up, which makes them kind of invasive and hard to manage for somebody like me. There's a big patch of them off to the side, and they grow really fast. And so they obstruct my view of the wildlife. So I have to go out there and chop them down to 2-3 feet high at a time of year when there's no ticks and snakes. And today might be a good day to do that, but with my hand like this, I can't be operating a scissor thing for hours out there. So I'll have to wait till the spring. So anyway, we're getting ready for the cold again, right, Tristan? So thanks for joining us today. I think what we're going to talk about today is to continue our discussion of animal communication, and this time in reference to lost animals. Now, many animal communicators will not work with lost animals. It's a very emotional and difficult time for a person, obviously, if your animal is missing. And for some animal communicators, this just isn't something they feel comfortable doing. A lot of people might start out in their career as an animal communicator feeling all right with it, but as time goes on, people get mad. They won't pay their bills if you can't find the animal. And let's face it, working with a lost animal as an animal communicator can be very difficult. For instance, the animal may be so panicked that he is unable to communicate very clearly where he is. And what can the animal really tell you other than what he sees where he is? So it's not always a great exact science, but if I had a lost animal, I tell you the second or third person I'd be calling would be an animal communicator who works with lost pets. And within a couple of hours of that pet being lost, for sure, I would be making that call, because they can be so helpful, especially when the animal is still in the vicinity of where you are. And there are many people that specialize in lost animal communication. There's a fellow out in the Western Berkshires here. That's pretty much all he does is work with lost animals. And if that's the case, he really is going to be able to specialize in determining what that animal's level of fear is and what's around him to get to a point where he can really get some information that can help you find your animal. For instance, there was a cat I knew once who had run away on a day like this when the weather was changing dramatically. He was out, he wouldn't come in. You know how cats are. So something happened and he did not come back for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And his person had just about given up on him and really had decided to be at peace with the fact that he chose his fate by refusing to come in, and cats are wild beings in their soul, and he just wanted to go. And he was young, he was like 5. And I had a really strong sense that that was not the case. I really felt like the cat was still around. was kind of like a little boy who's gotten into trouble. Like he was upset about what had happened, but he was making his way home and very regretful of his choices. So the animal communicator that was involved in this situation, the cat did come home, and the animal communicator talked to the cat and found out that what had happened to him, he was out and exploring and thinking, oh, I can go home in an hour. I'm not that far. I've been in this woods before, kind of like a teenage boy doing more than he should be. So what happened was something like a bear scared him and chased him, and maybe even a bobcat, because we are pretty rural here. And the cat ran terrified, and just tore up his pads and ran up a tree for safety, and then he couldn't get down. His feet hurt so badly. He was trapped in that tree for 5 days or so until his feet healed enough that he could get down the tree and make his way home. So in that case, the animal communicator really filled in the clues about what was going on and why it seemed so hopeless, because the person was feeling hopeless there for a few days because the cat probably was too. He had probably been making attempts to get down the tree and just couldn't do it because his feet were so sore. And, the person was picking up on his pain and his fear and just thought something horrible must have happened to him. So in that case, the animal communicator was super helpful in explaining what had gone on. In other cases, I had a friend who had a little dog that was staying at somebody else's house, and there was some slamming or people coming and going, and this dog really didn't like being at the friend's house and had been there a lot for babysitting. But anyway, the dog got loose and tried to make its way back to the original person's house, which was maybe, I don't know, not too far, 6-7 blocks, but through a busy downtown. So, of course, the little dog was confused by the blaring of the horns, and even though this person had walked and carried this dog everywhere, very active life this little guy had, the dog was so terrified that he ran away through the traffic and through some of the businesses and sidewalks along the side of this really main road. Maybe only went 1.5 miles, but there was so many big businesses, car dealerships, and railroad tracks, and then a major 4-lane highway up behind the railroad tracks. And so the dog was just very timid and constantly being terrified of his surroundings. And so the person knew the dog was somewhere around. Her worst fear was that the dog had been hit by a car and, crawled off somewhere. But in fact, the animal communicator, and she consulted 2 or 3, which I also recommend, because in this case, some were very inaccurate and some were very helpful. So one of them insisted that the dog was nearby, that the person was looking where the dog was located, but that the dog, once again, was terrified and afraid to come out. And so the person got on her bicycle and on foot and had some friends helping her. And of course, one of the most important things you do when you lose a dog is put signs up everywhere saying, lost dog, call me, reward. And that is actually the best way to get a dog back, and also to make sure your dog has a chip, of course. So this little guy, everyone felt, well, most people felt like the dog was around and could hear the person, was getting some reassurance, but it was getting cold. It was October, November-ish, and the dog was not a furry breed, like a Chihuahua or something. And so what happened was the person just kept searching, and they were standing there feeling despair and love for their dog, and they heard a rustling in the leaves, and it was their dog. But the dog was so terrified that the dog wouldn't even come to the person when they were 10 feet away. So the person immediately, thank God for cell phones, got on her phone and called a bunch of people and said, bring cat food, because dogs love cat food and it smells strong. And the dog had been loose for, 3-4 days. So people came, and they had to do what I do when I lost a rabbit. They brought a blanket, and when the dog came out of the shrubbery to go towards the food, they threw the blanket over the dog and scooped her up and brought her home. But because she was literally 12 feet from a 4-lane highway, so if she had gotten scared and run off, she would have been in big trouble. And, it's a major highway, so people are going 70. So anyway, thank God for those animal communicators that she had consulted who said, this is where your dog is, somewhere in this area where you've been looking. The dog is there, the dog is waiting for you, but she's terrified and she doesn't know what to do. So thank God my friend had enough faith in those people to keep looking and keep looking. And she also knew in her heart that the dog was in that area. Another time I knew of a border collie. Was it a border collie? Maybe it was a German Shepherd mix, who also escaped. You know, it was one of those evenings when there's a lot of confusion. You call, the dogs all come in except for one. And maybe there had been a deer running by, but the dog was missing. And the animal communicator was called the next morning. Like, this happened at like 6 p.m. The dog didn't come home. They consulted the animal communicator first thing in the morning. And the animal communicator described that the dog was trapped and not able to move, and described in great detail what the dog could see, which turned out to be a sort of a dilapidated shed. And the people knew immediately where this was, out behind their house in the back 40. And as one was on the phone, the other one was running out back and getting directions about where the dog was. And they did find the dog, and she was trapped by her collar in this shed that she had gone into at some point, you know, trying to get out of the cold, who knows. But thank God they called the animal communicator immediately, because when an animal's trapped like that, you know, they can only last a while without water and food, and it's very important that you get them back. So in that case, again, the animal communicator was very, very helpful. And only one time have I known an animal communicator that was consulted, when the dog was not recovered. And that was this Cairn Terrier that went missing in my neighborhood years ago, even as people have passed on now. And that little bugger, for 2 years, he was a tan-colored one. For 2 years, there were reports of this dog being seen here and there. And, you know, they're good mousers. I mean, they have pretty good survival instincts. But at a time like this, when the ice dams were coming and it was flooding a lot, and they had sightings of this dog even 15 miles away from where he was lost. And somebody that they were talking to, an animal communicator, felt like the dog might have gone into the stream and not come out, or, you know, accidentally slipped in. And I had also actually somebody with some Labradors that don't do tracking, but, you know, Labradors, like beagles, have big nose skills. She had taken her Labradors out for a walk trying to catch the scent of this dog, and we had some of his toys or his beds from his original home, and the Labradors picked up his scent and just were following it. And the person with the Labradors even couldn't believe how strongly they were trying to track this dog. And they walked right up to a busy stream and stopped and started circling and whining and crying as if they too knew that something bad had happened. So if that person had lost the Cairn originally, I mean, this was 2 years later after that little guy was running around the neighborhood, all kinds of weather here in New England. If the person had called somebody almost immediately, and we have a lot of woods around where I am, but we might have been able to get that little guy back, you know, and have him in one piece. But generally, I don't really think I know of anyone who's lost a dog who has used an animal communicator and not been able to get that kid back home, especially if you call right away. And it may seem a little far-fetched for some people. I have another story about their effectiveness. Bernie Siegel, Dr. Bernie Siegel, who's a friend of mine and a world famous cancer surgeon and pioneer in the field of mind-body medicine. He wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles, and wonderful books about animals, Smudge Bunny and Bernie's Candle, that you can look back on old conversations with a Corgi. And I read Buddy's Candle one time for all of our departed pets, and very beautiful story by Bernie. Well, one of his early experiences with an animal communicator was with the fact a dog, I think it was Buddy, one of his dogs, either Buddy or Furphy, had been just recently rescued. And Bernie had a van with a sliding door on the back, and I probably will get some of these details off. But he had gone into the grocery store, and when he came back, the back door of the van had slipped open. It wasn't closed all the way. He'd probably gotten his shopping bags out, and it just didn't slam. And one of the dogs was missing. And Bernie was panicked. He was like, "Oh my gosh, where's my dog? What am I going to do?" And he consulted an animal communicator right then and there. He knew one that he had worked with, and she said, "Oh, the dog has gone into the store and he's looking for you, and you'll be able to find him." So sure enough, he walked in right at the service desk. There was the dog. He got him back, put him in the car, and went on his way. And then a few days, weeks later, Bernie was at the gas station. And again, he had opened the back door and it hadn't closed all the way. When he came back to the car, the door was open and he flew into a panic. Oh my God, where's my dog? And then he's looking around in the shrubs and the highway and the gas station area. And he comes back to the car because the other dog was still in there to close the door. And there was that dog that had escaped the first time sitting there watching and waiting for him to come back. And Bernie was so excited. So the important part of the story is that it turns out, after talking to the animal communicator, that the dog had not liked being in cars because the prior owner who had abused him used to go around in the car and drink and get drunk and then scream and yell and hit the dog. And so the dog was afraid when he was in cars, and he was afraid that that would happen when he was in the car with Bernie, which is why he had jumped out. And Bernie promised him he would never, of course, do that, and he would never let that happen again to the dog. And Bernie said that when he quieted his mind and stopped panicking, like he made his mind like a still pond, that's when he had the vision that maybe his dog was okay, and he checked back in the car, and sure enough, there he was. So part of that, and I'm sure I've messed up the details of that story, but part of being able to find your dog when he's missing is also quieting your mind from the panic, having faith that he'll come home. That's where those T-Touch heart hugs come in really handy for yourself. You cross your hands over your heart, make a connection with the skin, make that circle and a quarter as you inhale and exhale, and just imagine your dog being right there in your lap, home safe and sound. And if you can do that, that will help your mind be quiet so that the animal communicator can really sense where your dog is and how he's doing, or your cat or your rabbit. I've lost some bunnies. And help the dog find his way back to you and help you find your way to where your dog is. So I think animal communicators are really important when you have a lost pet. And I certainly, if I lost a pet or had a close friend or a client who had lost a pet, really one of the first things I would tell them to do after putting up signs everywhere immediately and calling every neighbor is to call an animal communicator and track that guy as soon as possible. So I recommend that people listening today, I mean, lots of people like me, my dog's never more than 5 feet from me. I can't imagine losing him, but you never know. So I like to have somewhere on my phone or hanging in my house a couple of things. One is a picture that's already printed out in black and white or color that I can quickly type some information and then post if my dog is lost, and also the number of an animal communicator that works with lost animals. Not all of them do. I would say maybe 20% of them do lost pets, but it's really important to have that number available because people really, in that time of panic, may not have the wherewithal to sit down and look at their computer and try to find somebody in the area or far away, whatever, to help them find their pet. So that's our talk today about using animal communicators to help you find your lost pets. It can be really important, and it's very critical, I think, to keep a number of somebody who works with lost pets nearby and handy, as well as a poster of what you would put up if you did lose your pet, so that you don't lose a second getting those pictures up. They say that on the place where I get his chip, Pet Finder, not Pet Finder, I don't know, whatever it is, they send out newsletters every month with information about lost pets, and they say that most pets are recovered within 24 hours if you get those signs up immediately. So don't wait 3 days before you start looking for your animal. So thanks for joining us today for this talk about lost pets. Everybody stay warm in this changing weather. My gosh, it was 61 this morning and it's going to be 6 tonight. That's a big drop in temperature happening really quickly here in New England. But it's all right. We're going to stay inside. We have indoor activities planned today. Lots of stuff to do. And I've done all the outdoor stuff this morning. One of the things I discovered is that my knee-high rubber boots They do this every bunch of years. I don't know. I think these are 8 years old. They have now got a crack right in the ball of the foot, so they are no longer waterproof, which means they're okay for shoveling snow, but not for wading in deep water. So I am going to have to get myself a new pair. Most people do that in the spring. All right. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody. Stay warm. Be careful on the ice if you're anywhere from Ohio east all the way to Florida. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.